Welcome to the Leadership Purpose with Dr. Robin podcast. I'm your host, Robin L. Owens, PhD, and this is where we dive in each week to give advice, tools, and tips for high-achieving women who have written books that make a difference for people while at work. I am a professor, and when I'm not doing that, I am speaking, writing, coaching, and teaching high-achieving women who have written books how to make a bigger difference, have more impact, and more purpose with their books. Okay, let's dive in. Hello. Before we dive into today's episode, I've got some exciting news for you. We just launched our new podcast website. That's right, and this is where you can catch up on all our episodes and find exclusive content and so much more. So head on over to leadershippurposepodcast.com, leadershippurposepodcast.com. I know it's a tongue twister, huh? Let me say it again. leadershippurposepodcast.com. And we are building it to the go-to spot for everything Leadership Purpose Podcast. So in the coming days, you'll see it grow more and more, but it's launched now. So go ahead over and check it out, leadershippurposepodcast.com. And for now, let's jump into today's episode. Hi, everyone. Welcome back to another episode of the Leadership Purpose with Dr. Robin podcast. I'm so glad you're here and that you're listening into the podcast. I really appreciate you taking time out to listen. And because of that, you helped us be ranked in the top podcasts of all podcasts, according to Listen Notes. So really appreciate you. And today I'm talking with Helene Cahen, and she is the founder of Fire Up Innovation Consulting. And she's an experienced innovation consultant, facilitator, trainer, and coach with more than 20 years of insight and innovation and new product development. She helps Fortune 500 companies, small businesses, nonprofits, and more. And I can't wait to hear more from her about that. But let me just say one more thing. She's trained in the creative problem solving and design thinking technique. And she received her Master's of Science in, I love this. This is why I want to point this one out. Creativity and change leadership. I mean, that's not something you hear every day. And I love that. And she has a business degree from the elite. I don't want to mess up the name of the school. Tell us the name of the school.
Sciences Po.
There you go. And the last thing I'll say, she's a speaker and author. As I mentioned before, her book is Fire Up Innovation. If I did not mention it, her new book is Fire Up Innovation and Sparking and Sustaining Innovation Teams. Welcome, Helene Cahen.
Thank you so much, Robin, for the warm introduction, and congratulations on your podcast being so successful. It's an amazing support for all those women and ally out there. So I'm so honored to be here today.
I'm glad you're here. Now, I know this is not, you're not concerned about this, but I am. I gave my Americanized version of your name. Tell us the French sounding version of your name. That's more true.
Okay, so the French way to say my name is Helene. And the way to remember about it is like the letter L and the letter N. Helene.
Oh, okay, good. I just, I had to get that out there because we were talking about that. All right. So now I just read your official bio, but why don't you tell us in your own words, first about you, whatever you want to share about you, and then whatever you want to share about your work.
Okay, so about me, so I was born and raised in France. That's why my name is Helene. And my life in 30 seconds, I grew up in Paris. I'm a Parisian girl. And then I studied business at Sciences Po, as you mentioned. And I started to find the most creative job I could find. And that's a thread in my life. And so I started working in advertising for a few years. And then I moved to the US almost 30 years ago and worked in marketing research for Clorox for several years. And then as I started having kids, I decided that I wanted a more balanced life. I don't like the word balance, but a kind of a place when I wouldn't have to work 60 hours a week and not see my kids. And so I started my own business at the time and started in marketing research. Loved it for a while. And then I was like, I'm so good at it and I'm bored with it. What's else in my life? And that's how I heard about the program in creativity and change leadership at Buffalo University. And I went to a conference and I met people that have done that master. And I was like, this is my tribe. This is what I want to do next. And I was pregnant with my third kids and went back to school and got my master. And then from that, I decided to move my business from marketing research to innovation. So I've been in the field more than 15 years and I just love it. And it go back to my want to be in the creative world. When I was in advertising, I was already working in new products. And so that idea of change and new and innovation kind of in somewhere in my DNA. And looking back at my life even more, I realized that my dad was a pharmacologist. And so he created drugs at the time. And it was like, so it's really in my DNA somewhere.
Yeah, yeah. Okay, so since you brought it up, it's in your DNA. Was it evident when you were a small child? Was there anything that now that you look back, you say, hey, that was sort of, in your own realm of school or friends, or was there anything that indicates?
My childhood, I was kind of, I was a ballet dancer, so it's a lot of constraints, but there's also the art and the creativity of, dancing and all of that and being in touch with your body. But definitely when I start going to business school and stuff, and I realize, I'm much more interested. I'm actually trained in finance and I was good at it, but I'm like, that's not excites me. Mm-hmm. And so that idea of things that are new, things that are changing, things to be created is really something that throughout my life I've been really attracted to.
Yeah, yeah. Do you see anything else like this kind of theme of newness and creating throughout the years, always looking for or changing or seeking, or does any of that show up?
When my kids were little, you get a little really involved between your own business and your kids. But as soon as they got older, I started to do more workshops, like self-learning about myself. And I've done improv for 10 years.
Wow.
Yeah, originally I was really curious about the relationship between creativity and improv. So I took a class and then I got kind of hooked. And I love the fun of it. I love the playfulness of it. And I also love as a philosophy because it forces you to be in the moment.
Yes.
Because you don't know what's coming up
right.
from your partner. So the only thing you have to do is listen and just say whatever comes to your mind.
I love that because I always in my mind said, one day I'm going to take an improv class because I like what you're talking about, but I just never did it. So I'm glad that you did it. And for 10 years, you said, right? 10 years?
Yeah. So I've done in and out for 10 years. And in the past 4 years, I've done it much more regularly.
Wow. Good for you. Good for you. That I'm fascinated by creativity, the process of creating. It could be almost anything. I watch these documentaries about how this thing was created or that thing. And I'm interested in the moment of the idea and then how the creation process began. So I'm really fascinated about your work. All right. So now tell us about your book. Tell us about your book, Fire Up. Tell us the premise of the book, Fire Up, and tell us the whole title again.
So the title is Fire Up Innovation, and the subtitle is Sparking and Sustaining Innovation Teams. And, I'm a practitioner. So what I do with clients is really help them in a very practical way, helping the team collaborate better, work better together, especially in innovation teams, because there's a lot at stake, because there's a risk of failure, the risk that it can't be business as usual. And then you put people together on a team because of the skills, but their skills doesn't usually involve working in a team well in innovation challenges. And so I love that work. And I was trying to think about how I can kind of help others do it that I don't working directly with me. And then COVID hit and suddenly had more time. So I'm like, this is a perfect time. This is my COVID baby. I have time to think about it and try to think about how to communicate it. So the interesting balance is it's a book. So there's words, but a lot of it is words are not enough because you can't read about innovation. You have to do innovation. Yeah. And so really the thinking behind the book is what else can I do besides just words to help people? So I have visuals because I think sometimes visual is much better than a bunch of words. I have colors. So I have each chapter is a different color, which correspond actually to the table of content at the beginning of the book. And you would appreciate that because the table of content is actually a bunch of Post-its. And for auditors, they won't see it, but I have to share it with you. That's my table of content.
I love it.
Post-its, one per chapter and one color per chapter. So
I love it.
It helps remember, it helps make sense. And then the last thing I wanted to do is I wanted people to do innovation. So every chapter has 1 or 2 practices that you can do by yourself, you can do with your friends, with your colleagues, with your team. And that's really how you're going to learn. It's doing the practice, and then even more important is reflecting on the practice.
Is there one that comes to mind that something people could do without having the whole book and without giving it all the way, but at least to get started before they get the book?
So there's a fun practice, and it's about, going on a trip, like a family trip.
Mm-hmm.
It's really easy, but it's usually a lot of drama involved. So what I do suggest people is to actually have more of a systematic process. So they first define what's the challenge they want to solve. And then they're very clear about what the criteria are, because that's a lot of the frictions often happen because one person want to have a lot of time for food and the other person want to do sports and the third person want to go to bed early and the fourth one was like, no, they want to party all night. And then you try to get everybody together the next day and it's a disaster. So I kind of go through the idea of planning a vacation, which everybody can relate to, and kind of use more of a process to try to make it the planning being better and then the vacation being better, and you're clear about who wants to do what and how you can work it together.
Ah, that makes sense. Just taking a step back and looking at it and creating a system around getting things done. I love it.
You were talking a little earlier about, what is fascinating about creativity is about process. Like we always focus on the outcome and this is so cool, this new idea and this, but how do you get to it? And how we can be better at getting to it is really the process. But not many people know about the process, think about the process, take time to really build a process to enable the outcome to happen. And so this is really what I'm fascinated about and I love to do. Yeah,
because you probably have a special insight, because probably the reason why people don't think of the process because it doesn't come so readily.
Because people are not trained.
Exactly. That's what I'm thinking. Yeah. Yeah.
When you look even at school, a business school might have one class, maybe one creativity. Mm-hmm. And that's kind of it. But a lot of the work, and especially in the world that we're entering right now, between AI and quantum physics and all those fast pace of change, we are in an exponential pace of innovation. And unless we kind of understand the principles, it's going to be really hard to follow because there's so much stress about not the unknown and how we can get there together. And so I really believe that in a way, this book is really timely because of that. It is.
And I know you mentioned you had the time during COVID to actually do the book, but what, if any, what inspired you to do the book? I'm imagining there might have been some thinking about it before you just started writing.
Well, I have been thinking about it for 15 years, actually.
That's what I kind of wondered. So back then, what was the impetus to get?
So what happened is I was actually doing my master program and when I was at the dorm with one of my friends. And we're joking about, there is not a lot of, we call them sexy book about process. And we're like, we need to make innovation and creativity more sexy. So that was the beginning of the conversation. And, I didn't act on it for so long, but I always thought about it because I know there's a lot of books, but a lot of time, they're either a bunch of tools, which a tool doesn't do anything unless you understand the framework around it. Or there be academic book, which has a purpose, but doesn't help when people ask me, what book can I read if I understand your work? I didn't have a good book to suggest. So I figured I had to write that book.
Well, I'm glad you did. I just want to interrupt the episode for a moment to ask, is your book ready to be turned into a successful online course? Well, to answer that very question, I took the time-tested process that I use for turning books into successful online courses, and I created a free checklist that you can review and check off so you absolutely know the ways in which your book can be turned into a successful online course. So just head on over to createmasterfulcourses.com, createmasterfulcourses.com, and get your free checklist there. All right, now let's get back to the episode. All right. So now let's switch hats to your author self that we talked about a little bit, but I was very excited about the innovation and creativity, right? Okay. So let's think about yourself as an author. Throughout that experience of either writing or getting the book out into the world, what has been your greatest joy so far?
It's being able to actually put what's in my head or what I talk about when I'm with a group in a book that kind of reflect the way I think about it. So the format is really important, which is why the color, the graphics, etc., because that is something I would talk about, that is something I would do, and I wanted the book to reflect that. And I think when people open the book, they're like, wow, this is unexpected. And I love that. Wow. And yesterday, somebody just connected with me on LinkedIn and say they just found the book and they loved it. And I was like, it felt so good that, I was able to, somebody kind of, I didn't know, and it's really early in the launch, and I didn't know reach out and found something that was useful to them. So
love that. I love that. And that they took the time to do that, because if that's the response of one, it's probably the response of many. And I've seen a lot of books, but I've never seen a book with the color and the structure and the table of contents in the chapter. So I think that is creativity and innovation personified right there. Yeah. All right. So that's a great joy. We talked about this a little bit, but let me ask the question anyway, in case something else comes to you. What part of the book reflects who you are as a person?
I think something I learned in the past few years is really about authenticity and trying to be yourself. And this book it's kind of me in a book, like the way I talk, the way I would deal with the team, the story I'm telling. I also put in the book because I think storytelling is really important for people to relate and remember much better than a bunch of very nicely written words. So I think this book is me in terms of innovation and, just try to share my experience of 20 years in the field in a way that is real.
Yeah.
And not taking myself too seriously.
Good for you. Good for you. And when you mentioned 20 years in the field, it occurred to me, when you had the idea 15 years ago, maybe that wasn't the time because of all that you've gained since then.
Exactly.
Maybe.
It was just a concept at the time. It's just saying what we identify is there was a need.
Yes. Yes.
But
Yeah.
I was not ready. That would never have been the time.
Yeah. You brought all this other expertise and experience from that time to now. So that's great. All right. So now this podcast is for what I call high achieving women. High achieving women.
Yes.
It's a general term, but this is how I define it. And it's a woman who has one or more of these characteristics: ambitious, goal oriented, responsible. She's the one in her work and her professional life. People come to her and ask questions, just ask her about things. At home, people come to her and ask her about things. And she's good at a couple of things. And so it seems like she has it all together. So it never occurs to them that she might need some support, because she's always supporting everyone else. And so I thought, well, who supports that person while they're supporting everyone else? So I created the podcast so we can talk to each other.
So needed. It's so needed because we always put ourselves last.
Yes. Yes. All right. So now, with that woman in mind, what's something from either your personal or your professional life as words of wisdom or advice or anything to say to the woman I described?
I think it's try new things. Like I can look back and when my kids were little and I was running a business and I had nothing left for me. And so I didn't spend a lot of time with sourcing personally. And so when my kids get older and I had a little bit more time, I really value the growth, learning new things. And they can be professional, they can be non-professional, but it's all connected. Like the improv, I did it for fun, but it actually really applies to my work. And I think it applies to life in general or something. And then do things that give you joy. Because if you have that, then you can actually have more to give to others because you resource. So I think it's really important to find the time that we don't have, but it's prioritize the time for yourself.
Yeah.
That give you joy and give you nourishment.
Yeah. So important. So important. All right. So now, the podcast is Leadership Purpose. Do you think it's important for you or anyone else to have a sense of purpose in their work? And if so, why? And if not, why not?
I mean, for me, I always had a purpose in my work. I mean, I'm passionate about what I do. Sometimes maybe too passionate, like I can talk a lot and get animated, and I'm French, so I use my hands, and then I speak fast. So I don't see myself doing anything that I'm not passionate about. I think life is short, and yes, we have to make a living, and I'm lucky in a way to find a way to make a living that also gives me joy. So I acknowledge there's a privilege there. But as much as possible, I think to do things with passion and purpose just make anything else so much better.
Yeah.
Like the past 2 months, I've been super busy because actually my book is being launched today and preparing to the launch. And I work 15 hours a day and, to the point like I was exhausted, but also, and I'm excited about it.
Yeah.
And there's a joy to it. It's like there's a purpose. I'm putting those hours, but I know why I'm doing it.
Yeah.
So that really makes the whole difference in my life.
Yeah. And congratulations on getting your book out into the world. I'm sure it's going to make a huge difference. Well, we already know. We heard from some people already, so that's great. All right, Helen, you've been so gracious and generous with your time in the midst of all the launch and all that's going on and working these long days. Before we tell people how they can get in touch with you, is there anything that maybe I forgot to ask, I didn't ask, or something that popped into your mind right now that you want to say? Oh, I just want to say one more thing before we tell people how they can reach out to you.
One thing is to think that you're never too old to do something. Like last year, part of getting myself on my comfort zone, I signed up for a leadership program and I ended up backpacking in the canyon of Utah for 7 days with a 40-pound backpack. And
Wow.
that was definitely out of my comfort zone. The first 3 days was hell, but then I got out of it and I got into the flow and learned a lot from that. So just challenge yourself. You can do much more than you think you might.
Yeah, that's wisdom. That's wisdom. And congratulations to you. You not only teach this, but you live it. Like that's an example of you going out and trying something new and always doing your creativity with the improv. So good for you. I'm so glad you are here. Thank you for taking time out of this busy time in your life to be with us here today.
Pleasure. And I love good conversation. So anytime.
Okay, good. I enjoyed the conversation and I can go on for more time, but I know you have other things to do. So again, thank you for being here. And for our listeners, I'd love to hear your response to the episode. Tell us what you think, or if you have questions or just your response to the podcast, just reach out to me on social media. I'm on all social media platforms, but I spend most of my time at LinkedIn, and you can find me at any of those. But again, especially LinkedIn at Robin L. Owens, PhD, at Robin L. Owens, PhD. And if you're an author and you've been thinking about how to broaden your message beyond the book, and you've been thinking about creating an online course, but you just don't know if your book is even ready to be turned into a course, well, I have the answer for you. Head on over to my website, createmasterfulcourses.com, createmasterfulcourses.com, and pick up my free guide to let you know that your book is ready to be turned into a course. And until next time, this is Dr. Robin. Thank you for tuning into this episode of the Leadership Purpose with Dr. Robin podcast. If you enjoyed it, head on over and rate and subscribe so you never miss an episode. New episodes drop every week, and I can't wait to hang out with you again soon. Meanwhile, this is Dr. Robin signing off. See you next time.